The Director General, National Institute of Legislative Studies, Dr. Ladi Hamalai, still has lots more to say on the budget process in the National Assembly. Now, the Zonal Intervention Fund, there's a line of that in the 2016 budget. Is it the same thing as constituency projects?
Yeah, it's the same thing as constituency projects. So this is important because legislators worldwide represent constituencies. Constituencies in especially emerging democracies don't appreciate the lawmaking roles of legislature. They believe the legislators are there to bring social services, to bring development, to bring grassroots development. So a legislature has no value or worth if the legislator cannot be able at the end of the day to say, we brought this project, we were able to ameliorate some of the hardship of our community. So that is why it's common in many countries. Some countries have laws to support that. Some countries even provide the funds to the legislators themselves, who would now, in conjunction with the collaboration with the local governments and other municipal authorities, identify the projects for implementation and also sustenance. In Nigeria, it's the executive arm of government that implements these constituency developments. All that the legislator will be allowed to do is to nominate the projects within certain defined parameters, and it will be inserted in the budget. That's what this is all about, the constituency projects.
But how would you make it transparent, you know, this whole issue of the constituency projects? How do you ensure that it's transparent, that people are not taking, lawmakers are not taking undue advantage of these projects, you know, to for self-aggrandizement and, you know, for other nefarious purposes? How do you make it transparent?
I believe it's transparent enough in the sense that each legislator has his or her own limit. You know what you are provided for constituency project. You know that, and you recommend the projects, and it goes to the committee. So the committee would now do the insertions, not you as an individual. It's the committee. The earmark has been already defined, X amount for this only. So you have to come up with projects within that limit. And apart from that, some of these constituency project requests are formalized. A legislator will write to the committee chairman or will write to the principal officers, these are my constituency projects. Now, supposing even a presiding officer or principal officer has more funds, you find that some other legislators will write him that I have this dire need for this and I've not been able to get it, if you can help. So this is a common thing that happens in the National Assembly for over 10 years now. There's nothing unclear or opaque about it. It's transparent enough. People will write the projects, write it to the committee. The committee will now take all those requests to a formal committee meeting when they're addressing the budget, the appropriation bill, the sectoral appropriation bill. Now the committee is responsible for putting in. Then at the committee level, they write their report and send it to appropriation committee. The appropriation at the end of the day would now do the synchronization and pulling together. So the system, I think, is transparent enough. The insertion of constituency projects is transparent enough. What may be a bit more problematic is the level of scrutiny of the budget. So maybe we need to intensify, and that is why the Senate President
Now, when I was thinking about, this issue of constituency projects, which has generated a lot of controversy, not just now, for over, the past few years, we've had this ongoing issue of to be or not to be constituency projects. Would it help if every year when the budget is being, the budgeting process begins, that every lawmaker is, we have a list of all the constituency projects from the lawmakers, both in the Senate and the House of Representatives, a list which will be published, and Nigerians will be aware of the specific constituency projects coming from lawmakers. Would this make the process more transparent?
Yeah, it can be done. I don't think there's any problem getting that achieved. But whether we have the capacity and the infrastructure to identify all, the consensus projects are done by each ministry, provided for by each ministry, MDA. And that means you have to do a collation. Recently, we've started doing that at Nat'l. It's easy to pick out from the budget the constituency projects. You can even sum it up and see what went to the constituency projects as a share of that budget. But I'm not sure if that is the problem. The problem is more with implementation and sustenance. From my experience, how do you sustain these projects? How do you make them useful? If you construct 100 boreholes in particular states between the members of the House of Reps and the senators, how are you sure within the next 6 months the borehole has not broken down? How would you get money to repair it? Do you use your personal expense to repair it? Would you get money for maintenance from the federal budget again as part of your constituency project? Capital, no.
You're welcome back to the Gavel. Now, some opinion leaders are saying that the budget scandal in the House of Representatives is a blessing in disguise, as it presents an opportunity for conversations to be had on how to address the problems of inefficiency and lack of transparency in the budgeting process. We're seeing these conversations being held, and recently, the Senate President set up a budget reform committee to address the problems with the nation's budget process. A strategy paper is expected to be developed by this committee, from which a budget reform bill would be drafted by the main committee and the two chambers of the National Assembly. In the wake of the budget pardon controversy raging in the House of Representatives, Senate President Bukola Saraki has set up committees to reform the country's national budgeting process. The management of the annual budget, the medium-term expenditure framework and development plans have been marred by high-level inefficiency, ineffectiveness and lack of transparency. Currently, discussions are ongoing on the appropriateness of budget structures and the effectiveness of legislative actions and oversight. Calls for reforms in structures, processes and accountability abound. Now, these committees, set up by the Senate President, are charged with the responsibility of closing the structural and procedural gaps that limit transparency and accountability in the budget process and fiscal discipline.
It is expected at the end of your assignment, the Senate will receive a comprehensive budget reform proposal that will aid the passage of a budget bill that will address the following. A budget bill that will close the structural and procedural gaps that limit transparency and accountability in budget process and fiscal discipline. A budget bill that will design a legislative framework that will fully provide for effective oversight of off-budget accounts that typically lack oversight and transparency. A budget bill that will define efficiently timelines for the entire budget process.
Senate President Bukola Saraki stated that the 8th National Assembly is determined to implement budget reforms that would help open the budget process for greater scrutiny and openness.